West Shore members, guests who don't go to West Shore, we are so honored to have you with us today. And we are most honored to have today's Sunday Spark program our friend and sister, Reverend Nozomi Ikuta, who is the pastor at Denison United Church of Christ, with whom we are in the process of developing something called the Equity Lab. Nozomi's been a minister, I don't know for how many years, Nozomi, in general, and at the church, I don't know that, but they do a lot of amazing things. I'll let her share that with you if that's something she wants to. But without further ado, again, welcome to all of you. It's wonderful to see West Shore folks, but also to see, new people and guests on our screen today from other churches. So again, welcome, Nozomi. We eagerly await your vision and hearing your thoughts, and she will leave time for questions and answers as well. So with that, turning it over to you.
Okay. Well, thanks so much, April. I really appreciate it, and it's a beautiful day, so let's just give thanks to the Creator for this amazing world, and the gift of our friends and our enemies too. Anyway, just give a deep thanks for everything that is. And I also, I shouldn't do this, but I saw Rachel Abernathy on there, I have a lot of different kinds of relationships with people on this call, but Rachel was a really good friend of my mom's, and so when I saw you there, I just it's been so, anyway, I apologize for that, but
thank you.
Peace and blessings.
Your mother was wonderful. It was very good to me, helped me a lot in life.
So I wonder if those of you who are not from West Shore, let's see, there's a few from Avon Lake. So if you're sharing video, can you just give a wave if you're from Avon Lake? Just to give people an idea. And if you're from Lakewood, maybe, or Denison, that would be Carol. They're going to get a rerun kind of in a bit, maybe. Anyway, anybody, I just thought everyone else is, I think, from West Shore. Anyway, so.
Middleburg. Hi, Nozomi.
Middleburg! Hi, Barb!
How are you?
Anyway, all right. I'm looking forward to your lunch, Barb.
It's chicken today.
Okay.
And Archwood United Church of Christ.
Oh, Kathy! I didn't see you. Anyway, so blessings.
Okay.
Okay, blessings. Actually, most of it's the slideshow. So if we could get started with the slideshow.
Okay.
All right, and it moves pretty fast. I put the text right on the screen just because. So keep it moving, you'll know.
Okay.
So I want to talk about the Equity Lab. And the question of, okay, so what does equity mean, right? Maybe I'll go like that, but keep it moving. So it occurred to me, equities mean stocks, right? Like stocks and bonds, or real estate, which are two of the ways that the wealth disparity gets concentrated the most, and yet they're called equities. Anyway, I just thought that was kind of funny. So Nozomi, what do you mean by the Equity Lab? So I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Paulo Freire. I have a quote of his back here. His writing was so dense. But he said, it was funny that for some reason, poor people seem to understand his writing more easily than rich people did. But I just thought I'd put that out there as as an example of his writing. And next slide. And so I kind of wrote this tongue in cheek, but then I fell in love with it and I thought I'd put it out there anyway. What if the Equity Lab, go back? Oh. Go back, yeah. What if the Equity Lab were a place where humanization becomes an historical reality and not a merely ontological possibility? So what are you talking about, Nozomi? Say what? Okay. So around 2:20 on Friday, October 11th, 1991, on or about. I mean, the memory, the event was seared in my memory. I was attending a conference in Chicago, and one of the workshop speakers was this guy named Jose Lopez. And he said, with a little Spanish lilt, at our alternative school, our students are automatically going through a decolonizing process. And I said, huh? I mean, I have a good vocabulary. I understood the words, like I could probably pick the correct answer on a multiple choice test as to what that meant, but I had no real idea what he was talking about. I knew I didn't get it, but something about it and the way he said it intrigued me. So I'm hoping that you might be feeling the same way. So I kept going back and I listened to them and learned. And I went to meetings and I gave money. I gave money out of pocket, and I gave money because I actually had an office and a secretary and a program budget, a grants budget, and a travel budget. I blew up balloons. Oops.
Oh,
I
sorry.
blew up balloons. I swept the streets. I mean, I was a funder. But when I showed up, they'd go, hey, Nozomi, good to see you. Here's our broom. Anyway, so I helped pick up trash and I went on road trips with them. So bit by bit, I began to understand what Jose meant. At that school, and it was before the charters exploded and everything, the teachers were Puerto Rican. The principal was Puerto Rican. The heroes they learned about, people that normally you wouldn't hear about, like Albizu Campos and Betances, they were Puerto Rican. And the decision makers in their little microcosm, they were Puerto Rican too. So everybody in that little environment understood their shared reality. So at Jose's 70th birthday party, Jessie, who's now the principal of that school, told this story. She says, you know, when she was very young, a teacher, she had this question. And so she wanted to do something, and she asked Laura Johnson, who by then had a PhD, although she had started volunteering or working there right out of college, but she ended up going to she studied this community as her doctoral thesis. So Jessie asked Laura what to do for permission. And Laura went over to Marvin and said, Marvin, you got to talk to her. And so Marvin told her, this is the Puerto Rican Cultural Center. We don't ask people for permission here. So contrast that kind of environment where a white senior staff person was so committed to the idea of people's empowerment that she would, you know, go to a Puerto Rican staff member and ask him to kind of explain their vibe to this young Puerto Rican woman. Well, contrast that with the school where Jose had been a student and then went back as a teacher before starting this alternative school. And he tells the story of, you know, graduating at 16, being considering a super smart kid and racing through high school and college, to go back as a very young man and have access to the faculty lounge, and to find a teacher sleeping with a magazine or something over his or her, I don't even know the gender, head, saying, do not disturb Puerto Rican at work. Now, I don't know how many Puerto Ricans you guys know, but every single one of them that I've known has been like an incredibly hard worker. So the contrast, I mean, it's straight up insulting and racist, but it's also, in my experience, so completely like just inaccurate to my experience. So that was part of one of the motivators that helped found this other kind of school with this other kind of reality. So I began to understand that that school was a place where students who in other places felt like they didn't belong, or they were second class, or they just plain didn't matter, belonged and mattered. So when we talk about equity, issues of fairness come to mind, and it is and isn't fundamentally about fairness. It's about being treated like a human being. Whoops. So let's go back to the topic of fairness for a minute, though. Okay. You know, from our earliest years, we've had this inborn sense of fairness. You know, who gets what toys at the playground, who gets the bigger cookie, right? We have this deep, innate sense of what that's all about. Even monkeys know it. Have you seen this? And we're going to need to advance it to 1 minute and 20 if it's not. Hello? Can you play it? There you go. I don't know what happened to the audio, but this is a study with capuchin monkeys, and they had a task.
So I'm sorry, you could not hear that?
I couldn't. Could you?
Could anybody else hear it? Nobody could hear it?
I can explain it. You can just
Okay.
pause it for a minute. I'll explain it then.
All right, I paused it.
So they did the study with capuchin monkeys, and they gave them this very simple task. They had to give a rock to the researcher, and the reward was a cucumber. So go ahead.
Okay, you know what? I think the problem is I've got my speakers plugged in. Do you want to watch this?
Just watch it. Just watch it. Oh, well, so they gave the
I can hear you.
you can hear me, but let me just explain what you're seeing. So they gave this task to the monkeys, and they rewarded both of them with a cucumber. And then the second time, then one of them saw the other get a grape, and then the first one was given a cucumber for the same task. So that's the deal. They do the same task, but one ends up with still gets another cucumber, and the other one, after seeing the other one get a grape. So that's what happened. That's the scenario. You can just go ahead and play it.
When she eats it, the other one needs to give a rock
Can
to
you guys
us,
hear it now?
Oh,
Okay,
that's what
I
she
just had to
does.
unplug my speakers.
and she gets a grape. And she eats it. The other one sees that. She gives a rock to us now, gets again cucumber.
okay, that's it.
Did you want me to
Okay,
keep
next
going?
slide.
Okay.
It's pretty innate, right? It goes
Yeah.
back deep into our primate past. And every school child knows that we're supposed to be a nation that's indivisible with liberty and justice for all.
But it's not true.
And yet we accept these vast disparities as just the way things are.
Oops, sorry.
So, in 1954, the Supreme Court struck down separate but equal. So why is our society still so segregated? So hanging around Denison, I see this mix of Black, white, Latin, and Middle Eastern every day, and some Asians, like me and other groups. I tend to forget how segregated so many places still are until maybe I go to a mall or the Metro Parks for a walk. I think about some of the progress we've made fixing up the Denison Church building until I have to take my Mac in for a tune-up at Crocker Park. Now, who wouldn't rather live in a pristine but artificial city like that instead of a cosmetically challenged but real city like this? You can see the church, Denison at the, this is our street right here. And how did we get here anyway? So from toddlers and monkeys who instinctively chafe against unfairness to rational adults who just accept all this as normal. Now, for me, it started here. You know, I had parents who read to me. We read to our kids. So I did very well in school. And from the first day of first grade, when we were put into reading groups, all of us, wherever we landed, we knew, you know, where we belonged, what our place was. My group was the red group. We were the top readers. We were going to get A's and we were going to like school. And in second grade, when the teacher let the various groups name themselves, the first name that got snapped up was the red group. I loved school. I worked hard and I got a lot of A's. I never doubted that I would go to college, and I knew I deserved a good job. And I got into an elite college and an even more elite seminary. Even so, I struggled for 9 years on the wife and mommy tracks. I finally landed this plum job at the National UCC, where I traveled a lot and met amazing people like Jose Lopez, who blew my mind. And for 9 years, I had the kind of job that I figured that somebody with my kind of pedigree deserved. I learned so much from Jose and the Puerto Rican community there in Chicago. It wasn't mainly about the facts of Puerto Rican history or figures. I was learning how the white suburban way that I had grown up in was not the only way to see the world or to move around in it. Now, my husband, James, had similar learnings from teaching at Collinwood, where not only all the students were Black, but his department chair was Black and the principal was Black. And we both learned similar things from working with the Native and Hawaiian communities that we were, you know, these are enormous privileges that we were able to have. In all of those cases, we gained so much more than we gave. So in 2000, the UCC restructured and life took a tough turn for me. 5 years later, a little rough around the edges, I ended up at Denison, and I found myself asking how Denison could be that same kind of place that that high school was, a place where people who felt like they didn't matter or didn't belong felt that they mattered and that they belonged. But to be honest, I also felt kind of sorry for myself. I mean, here I was earning about a fourth of the salary that I had when I was at the National UCC without any benefits. But as I got to know the people here, my worldview changed. As I became embedded in this community, I realized how much better off I am than most of the people around me. I realized that's why almost no one who ever borrows money from me ever pays it back. Meeting Jose changed my life, but so did meeting people like the ones you're going to see on the next few videos, and they're very brief. So this is Daryl, and he just got housing.
Like me, been homeless, just got my place. I've been going through a lot of things in my life, nobody to talk to, so we'll just bottle it up. Struggle, update. That's everything. Life not going nowhere for me, you know.
Were you able to hear that well enough? Do you want to?
I couldn't understand him because someone was talking and the video has talking in the background.
Yeah,
so
it was a noisy environment. Let's just keep going. They're very brief.
Like me, been homeless, just got my place. I've been going through a lot of things in my life, nobody to talk to, so we'll just bottle it up, like, and just struggle, maybe cover it up with beer, weed, that's everything. Life not going nowhere for me, you know.
This is Brandon.
Just taking the time to actually understand why somebody's in the situation that they're in. It helps. Because some of these people, they don't feel like anybody cares.
Okay.
Just taking the time to actually understand why somebody's in the situation that they're in. It helps. Because some of these people, they don't feel like anybody cares.
And then this is dread.
But if you have one or two who might read a periodical, read something that will make them better, is a blessing. But if you have one or two,
And two, if you're homeless, you have to take care to fix what you messed up. Fix what you messed up. And two, if you're homeless, yeah.
Okay, so Latrell didn't make it in, but I just wanted to, those are very brief clips, but obviously they've dealt with hunger and homelessness and stuff like that. But Dred referenced the role of, reading and thinking deeper and broader thoughts. And Thurston talked about, making amends for the things that you've messed up. And Brandon and Daryl talked about just what it feels like to think that nobody cares. So I think all of those speak to that yearning for, humanization, to use that term. These kinds of encounters knock me off my pity pot and help me realize how privileged I am. How I had accepted the disparities because I told myself that I had earned my privileges. Because after all, I'm the daughter, niece, and granddaughter of a family severely traumatized by being hauled off to a concentration camp and getting called names growing up in Brook Park. But to be honest, we had the means to process our trauma by, for example, visiting the camp where my family was incarcerated. And here's a photo of us at a reunion of the camp a couple of years ago. And the truth is, despite this current anti-Asian violence period that we're having, and by the way, I've grown up with those kinds of comments you've been hearing, still, the truth is that Asian Americans have generally done pretty well compared to the other groups of color. And we've done it largely by buying into a model minority storyline that's divided and separated us from the peoples who've been colonized, raped, and killed for 400 to 500 years. And we're continuing to be killed today. So this whole thing got me thinking about the idea of social location and how complicated it is, and how difficult it is, or really impossible, for any of us to claim, for most of us to claim, a very specific location on this whole matrix of privilege and hardship or disadvantage or whatever you want to call it. The gender gap is maybe the most obvious case where, men and women have always lived together. Whatever your sexual orientation is, generally speaking, we're here because men and women got together in some way. So, there's this overlap. Now, whether they're straight or LGBTQ, whites and Asians also tend to overlap a fair amount. If you go to the doctor or you're in a science lab, you're probably gonna run across a few Asians. But the darker the hue or the bigger the wealth gap, the less the groups tend to interact. And by the time you get to the space of professional white Americans and poor Blacks, there's really very little overlap, unless you're looking at a workplace setting between like the CEO and the janitor or something like that. But the truth is, although we often conceptualize these gaps in a sort of horizontal metaphor or image, the gap is actually one that's vertical in nature in terms of access to wealth and power and almost everything else. And it's not just that there's a gap, there are multiple gaps. These gaps define really every aspect of our lives. I was going to say they're only material, but of course they're not only material, because the way these material gaps manifest themselves affects our spirits, affects our sense of worth and value and our place in the world. So, and it's not just the people on the top who accept this gap, the people on the bottom do too. Here's just one example of people who articulate and believe in things that are clearly against their own innate interests. Regardless of the ism, we're all swimming and breathing in it the way fish breathe in water. And just as I felt entitled to climb the social ladder, instead of it like occurring to me that maybe my job was to help a kid who was struggling more in school, we are all swimming in this idea that white cis males are entitled to a little bit more than the rest of us. And we may have the idea of mutual empowerment, but we naturally drift into this provider-client relationship where there are experts up here and laymen down here. And the experts tend to be white or Asian. So it's one thing when the lay people, the people being helped, the clients, belong to the same ethnic or racial group as the expert. But what if the person in the lesser position, whether it's a student or a legal client or a patient, is Black or Indigenous or Latinx, and everybody that they know that they can go to for help is of this other group? And when it comes to church partnerships, which model are we going to default to?
You come to us.
The provider-client relationship will always be our natural tendency because it's what we've all been conditioned to do. So pursuing a different model will take our conscious, concerted intention and effort. So here's the thought, that in the Equity Lab, we're going to give extra attention to Black and Indigenous and people of colors, cultures, and heroes, because they tend not to be known or celebrated. We're going to understand trauma and poverty as everyday realities, not as a goal. You know, the goal is to eliminate that, but to understand that that's part of the fabric that we're dealing with right now. We're going to build deep relationships with one another. We're going to help our suburban visitors debrief off-site as part of this process of action and reflection and action. And we're going to understand deep in our spirits that real encounter, especially across these divides, makes the angels sing and helps people of privilege gain insights about the world that they could not gain any other way. To coin a phrase, the Equity Lab is a place where humanization becomes an historical reality, not a merely ontological possibility. In the Equity Lab, hopefully, people are automatically going through a humanizing process. Or, to put in more religious language, the Equity Lab, Denison Church, however you want to frame it, it's a place where everybody knows a little bit more deeply that they are a precious and beloved child of God. I didn't really have to use all those fancy words. It's a place where people become more fully human, more fully what God intended for us, by closing the gaps of race and class that so often separate us. So if you want to join in, you'll learn things like, why did Jesus say to lend, not give, without expecting anything back? Well, because people know in their bones whether or not you can afford to just let it go. Why did he say not to be anxious? Well, this is from my husband. He says, you know what? They didn't have a whole lot of fancy medicine back then. Maybe the only real cure they had was based on your immune system's ability to respond to stress. And why did the Gerasene demoniac hang out in the tombs? This just hit me a few weeks ago. I've known that story like since I was a kid. But when I realized how much loss, from health issues to violent deaths, people in neighborhoods like ours experience in their families, it occurred to me, this guy probably lost his last family member. That's why he was hanging out in the tombs. It wasn't just incidental to the story, it set the framework for that whole story. More important, you'll learn, I think, what Jesus meant when he talked about these hidden treasures, like that treasure hidden in a field. And if you find it, you'd sell everything you had to buy that field or that pearl of great price. Or, you know, that one about the rich young ruler who was really almost there and then he walked away from it because he had so much stuff. So anyway, that's the invitation. I just know that these experiences that I've had that pushed me out of my comfort zone, that I would not have actually volunteered for. I just was minding my own business. I got a job. I got pulled down a rabbit hole without necessarily intending to. And I ended up at Denison, not necessarily from a plan that I had, but I guess somebody had it. So it's an invitation to you to see things that you really, I think, would not be able to see in many other ways. Yeah. So anyway, here's a little word from Jake, who I invited to be here, but he had another commitment this morning. Jake has been preaching about half the time, every other week, with me here at Denison. Hi, Jake. Oh.
Stories of trauma that far surpassed that of my own.
Can you guys hear that?
Yes.
Okay.
I remember being a child wanting nothing more than to be a cop when I grew up. That was until I was 15 years of age and I had my first, and I do mean first, encounter fitting the description. My childhood was snatched from me at that moment in time, and I will never be the same. It was a traumatic event for me, and it changed my perspective on what it means to be me, or to look like me, or to be in the skin that I'm in a place we call America. And I walked away with my freedom because I knew how to act right. I walked away with some semblance of dignity, though it wasn't much. I think about so many other individuals who deal with far more traumatic events than that. And I feel that it's my responsibility, all of our responsibility, those of us who have power and privilege, to begin to do something, to speak out against injustices, to use our platform to bring about change. I feel that if we're not going to make this world a better place, why are we here? Places like the Equity Lab, I think, are prime grounds to begin to plant seeds of change, to have those uncomfortable conversations, to put our brains together to figure out how we can fix this situation. Making Facebook posts are cool, and talking about it with our friends, that's great as well. Sometimes I feel like we can do a little bit more. I believe that the Equity Lab is a place where brilliant minds can come together, have intellectual conversation, and see if we can come up with some ways, some solutions where we can do just a little bit more.
All right, I think that's all oh, there may be one more screen.
For me, the Equity Lab is important because
Anyway, there's just a graphic. And I've also been concerned, I just saw the little chat about the way the TV, I'm not sure that it improves the quality of our lives or relationships, but anyway. That's what I have. Any questions?
I liked how Jake, is it?
Yeah.
Said we can all do a little bit more. And that's so inviting, the way he put it. It was surprised me. Never heard it put that way. It's a good idea, I think.
So are there plans for instituting the Equity Lab? How do we join in?
Where'd that question come from? I didn't see.
Kathy Ross.
Yes.
So West Shore has been the sort of core entity. So we've talked primarily about the idea of the Denison-West Shore partnership. I'm pretty sure that West Shore would be happy to expand that concept from a sort of bilateral relationship to a multilateral one. But you know, the main invitation is for people to start by just kind of trickling in after they've gotten inoculated, and hopefully the pandemic will subside a bit. And you know, I'd really rather have people come a couple at a time and just come for lunch, or you know, come work in the garden, come do a little this and a little that, where you can just interact with the people here, as opposed to coming in a big group where you then transport the bubble from wherever you're used to.
I like that. I like that.
So, but then once we have a critical mass of people to create some sort of mechanism for the debriefs.
Dorothy Fowler has a hand up.
That was a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much. This last week, I watched something on World Channel about homelessness. I hope some of you also saw it. And it had to do with an experiment that's been going on for years and years in California about finding homeless people needing a place to live and being provided with a trailer. And it made a community on 27 acres. It developed, you know, with garden and a lot of activity and so on. But the bottom line or lines of that story were that a lot of those people became homeless at 7, 8, 15, 19, and were sent to the street for the rest of their lives. And the leader of this program at the end talked about the main issue for all of them was family. I'd like you to comment on that, Nozomi.
Well, so Friday was the last, Thursday night was the last night of the shelter for this season, and Friday was the last morning. So Friday was this whirlwind of activity. And in the last couple months, we've gotten to know this one organization. I'm not here to pitch them per se, but I'm impressed with their wraparound services, because back in the day, if you wanted to, let's say, go to drug treatment, you were supposed to call someplace every day for 2 weeks and try to get a bed, you know? And it's hard to hold that thought for 2 weeks. What this place does is you call them, they come get you, take you for an assessment. If you need detox, they have an MD who can either do light duty detox or refer you to heavy duty detox. And after that, you live in one of their houses and they'll pick you up and transport you for the therapy part of, you know, the treatment, you know, PHP, IOP, all that. And then as you get more stable, they give you work readiness, prep, and so on and so forth. So I don't know, I think maybe about 10 guys over the course of the season ended up with these folks. I'm not sure exactly the number. 4 went, I think, on the last day. But I think what happened was they found some community. They got kind of used to, you know, having a safe place to sleep, warmth, food, showers, laundry, you know, movies, maybe too many of them, but a place where they felt safe and they belonged. And I think that getting used to that meant that going, even though the weather was warmer now, the idea of going back to the street seemed less attractive, having experienced something a little closer to normalcy. So I think my reflections about humanization or, you know, experiencing your God-givenness were really reinforced by that whole experience with the shelter.
Thank you.
Nozomi, can I say one thing really quick? Would that be okay?
Yeah.
I work in Cleveland schools and I work with families. I'm a therapist. And I work with families who, I'm thinking of one family in particular who just keeps becoming homeless. The mom works her butt off. There's a mom and a dad, everything that you can possibly think of that's supposed to, you know, in these family narratives, keep people from becoming homeless. And it keeps happening again and again. And what I think the story of family leaves out is a story of how systems keep people oppressed. And I think that this is really important. I've watched this family, I've worked with them for 2 years, and it keeps happening again and again. And a big part of that is what the landlords are allowed to get away with, so which is part of a system. So, I mean, we can say people don't have family, and maybe that's part of the story, but I think it's so much bigger than that, and I see it on a real everyday basis with families that I'm working with. So,
well, of course, Bridget, and it's like, duh, why didn't I say that? I think it's embedded in, and I really feel not sort of embarrassed not to have made that more explicit. So thank you, Bridget. But I'm
sorry, I didn't mean it.
No, it's okay. No, I'm grateful. No, it's okay. I'm grateful. But I think that this whole notion of dehumanization and humanization is really deeply tied into these bigger concepts of social and structural injustice and, frankly, colonialism, where this notion of privilege and a two-tier system just being so embedded in everything that we're used to, and going back in our history. So anyway, thank you. I think that's a more holistic articulation.
I'm wondering so it's 10:15. For those who'd like to go to service, you can. For those who'd like to stay on, Nozomi, I don't know what your time commitments are. We could maybe stay on for another 5 or 10 minutes if that works for you, if people have other questions or insights. How long are you able to stay, Nozomi?
Well, I'm okay. I would feel a little guilty for diverting the West Shore official service, though.
Well, it's people's choice. That's all I'm saying. People choose to leave to go to service. Now, we totally understand and honor that. But for those of you who might like to stay, and if you're able to, I think it would be great to continue for a few more minutes.
And people from other churches may have later worship services. So
that's true too. for all of you who don't know, our starts at 10:15 and we're now at 10:16. So I just guess I feel compelled to say, first of all, I love the slideshow. Every time I listen to you talk, Nozomi, I feel like the ideas are done so I struggle sometimes with comprehending everything, and you've done it really simply and beautifully. And each time I listen to you talk, it's like I get a better sense of how it's going to unfold and what it looks like, the it of it. And I guess I found myself wanting to ask you to share with the folks, like I know you said the Haven is closed, but what are the ways and times? So the idea that I remember as we've begun to talk about developing the Equity Lab is people volunteer, you experience this reality that is not predominantly, not all of us are white and not all of us live in the suburbs, but the sort of white dominant culture piece you were referring to, Nozomi, in your slideshow, to enter into Denison, and there's plenty of other places as well, but today we're talking about Denison, it's just a different reality. We're walking in a different world, and we learn by doing that. So what I'm remembering is that people volunteer, they experience that, and then, as you said, Nozomi, when we reach a critical mass once a month, we get together, not at Denison, to talk about, oh my God, I've been thinking this all along, and then this person said that to me, and I'm realizing how judgmental I was, or what I thought about poverty, or what I thought about a whole variety of things that might come up just in being with people who aren't who we are. So I guess I'm asking if you can tell us what those volunteer opportunities might look like, and to let everybody know, as you said, when we reach critical mass, I'm not sure what that is, then we could, all be in touch with each other and find that offsite place, which could be West Shore once things open up or whatever. Another one of our wonderful churches here on screen could do that too, but I've said enough. I guess you understand what it is I'm asking.
So we continue to be open 5 days a week, including Sundays from 10 to 1. And we feed people every time we're open. So, I mean, Janet's a great cook and she's happy to cook, but, cooking's an easy way to connect. And Latrell has kids on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday evenings. So those are our two main nodes, plus the food pantry, and which is monthly. And just to give a couple of examples of, I think, close to best practices or good practices. So like a lot of people donate meals, but Dale and Barb, who donated meal today, before COVID, always came to church with us. So they didn't just like hide in the kitchen cooking during the service. They came up and experienced the flow. Two West Shore affiliates, Kim and Linda, have been helping with the food pantry. And, they've just sort of fit in with the flow and, participate that way. So those are two real case examples right now of people who are have already begun to live out that model. There was another question. We would like to facilitate or help facilitate whatever that small group in the burbs process is. And I don't mean to be crass, but if you're going to give money anyway, if we could see it sort of less as just a donation and more like tuition, right? So the guys that I interviewed, I gave them each $5. Now, maybe their comments were worth more than $5, but, and not all of them did things that I really approve of probably afterwards with it. But, it's like they lent expertise and voice in ways that probably you might not have experienced this morning in another way. So like, how do we build capacity into this process? I didn't even tell you about the gym renovation project that we're hoping to use as financial literacy capacity building project, but that's for another day.
Nozomi, Heather's asking two questions here. She's saying, and I don't know if you can see the chat. She's saying, I'd like to hear more about the idea of debriefing in small groups after the personal experiences. And then she also wants to know about food pantry days and times, and can people come help pack groceries, and how do they interact? How can they interact with that opportunity?
It's a lot of moving boxes, and they're heavy.
I do that for a living.
There's also some computer work and so on and so forth. It's the fourth Tuesday of the month, so it's coming up. There's renting the truck, just making the reservation and getting the truck. There's just like an infinite list. They call me the ADD queen, and I'm in charge of all the details of the church. God help us, Anyway, the food pantry is the fourth Tuesday of the month. Regular outreach, 5 days a week, 10 to 1. I have this little thing that I try to do, like helping people, remember that, not to go power tripping on their volunteer status, which is, I think, less of a danger. Anyway, it's a human danger that I've experienced among people from all races, classes, backgrounds, and geographical locations.
I would just like to say, my personal prejudice is to get away from this concept of volunteering to help those less fortunate that we are. And I'm wondering if we could consider it as participation. I remember some projects I was been involved with previous churches where in exchange for some of the members of that church who were Latina teaching us to make embroidery, we were helping them with English. It was much more a fair trade sort of thing, rather than, we're here to help you because you can't, does that make sense?
I think you're on a similar line of thought as to what I'm thinking, or trying to articulate. You could just come to church. I'm not asking you to quit your own churches, but once a month, once a quarter, every now and then, you could either come to church, or I tried unsuccessfully to start a Zoom link for Bible study, but we could resurrect that idea. So those are Wednesdays at 1. Come for lunch, on a Wednesday, and stay for Bible study. So there are other ways to just plain interact.
Right.
And then whatever else emerges could just emerge from those connections.
I have a quick question. Is there a way we can share this recording with other people? Where would we find this recording after it stops recording?
I think that is a question for Christine.
Is she here?
She is here. And she is here. However, she must have stepped away for a moment, but she's the one who's recording this. And that is such a good question. How are we going to give everyone access to this recording? Could it go on Denison's website maybe?
Well, as a first step, in terms of email, I have all the emails of the non-West Shore people, and West Shore has all the emails of the West Shore people. Okay. So what if I made a group email between the non-West Shore people, everybody whose emails I have, and if I do that on this conversation, and if I do that, then everybody from West Shore probably has a way of connecting, and then we can put them together.
I'll say I've made a list of all the participants of the West Shore people from going into the participants. So I think I've got an accurate name list of everybody from West Shore that showed up today.
Would there be maybe it would be a good idea to upload the video onto West Shore's YouTube channel. So there's a really simple shareable link with a central place that anybody just clicks on the link and it goes to YouTube, rather than
an awesome idea. I think Christine could do that, right?
Okay.
Can I ask one? Just because I know it can be very touchy with West Shore members, the whole religious and Christianity. You know, I just think there's a lot of people who come from religious trauma who came to West Shore. So I just wanted to ask, like, what role do you see, like, and I don't care myself, but there were references to Jesus in the, if people are watching this from West Shore who are very sensitive, like, is it going to be religious orientated, or is it going to be more, is the word secular, right? Secular orientated, like, pardon? I don't know the word, but okay. I don't even know what that word means, but like, I'm just wondering for people who might be a little leery, I don't want people to not want to do it because they think it's going to be a religious experience. If it's, do you see, I'm sorry, do you see what I'm saying? I'm trying
You
to.
know, I do, and I'm not sure how to say this, but I'm probably about as secular comfortable as you're going to get among ordained ministers in any tradition to the right of the UU. You know,
Nobody's talking about converting anybody to Christianity. There was never a single peep about conversion.
No, there wasn't. I just know that people get some people can get very.
But that's their personal journey and trauma to process. And I don't think entire organization, like a group that's trying to do good in the world, needs to kowtow to like somebody's maybe trauma. Like, nobody's trying to convert anybody. It's all just about living an example of Jesus Christ. And even if you're anti-religious, very few people are going to look at Jesus and say like, ugh. Like, he's Jesus, he helps people, you know.
Margaret, I totally agree with you. And if we could see this as just another example of different lives, you don't have to defend or object. It's part of the lives, it's part of the learning.
The same way the
that's all.
Poverty and trauma is part of the people's lives. Yeah.
And if I could just add, I think this is a growing piece for West Shore. I think it's important for West Shore in our, you know, as we talk about the divisions of the world that we're living in, learning to show up with people who talk about Jesus or who have a different spiritual or just even a spiritual view, and being able to be in conversation and eat a meal with that person. I mean, that's part of what that's, I mean, it's just one more layer. It's a really good point, Bridget. And I think from our end at West Shore, because of who we are as a faith, because we hold so many different views, one of the ways that I think we can talk about the Equity Lab is to include, and this is also part of journeying into a church where people will be talking about Jesus and God, not to convert you, but because it's their path. And how do we continue to walk in the world together, right? With, again, we need not think alike to love alike.
Well, if I may, I think that to Bridget's point, if there are people who are super highly traumatized, then they should maybe not do this project, or have a one-on-one conversation with me to try to, what's the word? You know, inoculate or something. But honestly, we have people from a lot of different religious backgrounds at Denison. Most of them more traditionally evangelical than I am. So I mean, I'm just, you know, they should know that if you can't handle, I mean, you know, I just, but I would love to talk with them individually to try to mediate some of that in advance. But people are mostly not from the UCC. They're mostly from more conservative traditions.
Yeah, I don't know how many people.
If I may be,
but Kim just had a really good comment that she dropped in the chat. And I don't know, Kim, if you want to say that out loud or if you want me to read it. But I feel like people should hear that.
And Michelle wanted to say something to you, Reverend Michelle.
Yeah, if I could be so bold, I want to say that actually I think what we are desiring from people who go to Denison and participate in the Equity Lab is in fact some sort of religious or spiritual experience. Not in the sense that, you know, anyone is necessarily going to be washed by a bright light, you know, and hear some sort of voice from above, but a transformative experience, you know, one in which you are different afterward than before, you know, connected to some sort of larger sense of wholeness, you know, some vision of what the world could be like, whether or not you call that world heaven or the kingdom of God, etc. And that part of this process is, you know, as many people have said before, to interact with people who exist in a different paradigm. And I think it could, in fact, actually be very healing to someone who might have religious trauma in some way. I mean, I'm not saying this is some sort of cure. To see, you know, how these stories are uplifting and saving for people. It helps them make sense of their suffering. You know, it helps them, it helps ground them, you know, and helps them through the tough patches in life. You know, is belief in these stories or belief in an afterlife or any of the things that, you know, people from West Shore have suffered trauma from and are the reason, you know, perhaps that they sought refuge in a Unitarian Universalist community in the first place. And that also is something that, you know, that's part of the reason that there is, you know, this idea of like the small group debriefing that Heather asked about, you know, and that's something that can be processed in these small groups too, you know, did this bring up any of your religious trauma, you know, and have your peers to help work you through it.
I'd like to just kind of throw in there, I've been a person that has spent, I'm not going to say a lot of time, but has spent some time with shelter guests at Denison and have participated in, you know, food pantry and other activities. And I come from a place of religious trauma. I have found my experience at Denison to be very healing, like you mentioned, Michelle. When I sit there and I am in community with people there, I have met people of all faiths, Buddhists, Muslims, and one of the things I've enjoyed most is listening to their faith stories, their spiritual journeys, their life paths. And as you mentioned, Michelle, just the spiritual experience, I think even it just has opened my eyes to so many things that I think people coming in, maybe there might be some triggers, there's crosses on the wall or what have you, but it's really such an amazing experience that I think I would hope people could get past that. And maybe if there is super serious, as Nozomi said, to meet with her. But I think people find it more welcoming than they might think as a UU.
Thank you. All right, well, you guys have been very generous with your time, and I'll include my cell phone number in the email, and everybody else has it. You might as well too. And anyway, so thank you for sharing this time together.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your time with us today, and thanks for everybody who came and stayed. Everybody have a great one.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Oh, and Dorothy, good to see you too, if she's still here. From my mom.
Thank you very much.
All right. And so I'm logging off. And Carol, if you want a rerun, we're going to do a lot of the same thing in church. But I'd love to see you again if you'd like.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I didn't hear you.
Oh, the sermon is basically going to be the same thing, but I'd love to see you again anyway.
Can't hear you. I'll see you at the service.